Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Ukraine has accused Russian forces of shelling evacuation routes for civilians seeking to flee the Russian invasion. Ukraine's foreign ministry says Russia violated a ceasefire agreement to grant safe passage to civilians in the southern coastal city of Mariupol for a fourth day in a row. Speaking from his office in the capital, Kyiv, on Monday night, President Volodymyr Zelensky slammed Russia for reneging on an agreement, he said, for a humanitarian corridor, and for the Kremlin's offer to evacuate civilians only to Russia and Belarus.
They even mined the road that it was agreed would be used to bring in food, medicines for children, for the people of Mariupol. They even destroyed buses that are meant to evacuate people. At the same time, they opened a tiny corridor leading to the occupied territory for a couple dozen of people.
Residents of Mariupol describe a dire humanitarian situation with constant artillery fire, no heat or electricity, despite freezing temperatures. Some residents have reportedly been forced to drink from puddles amid shortages of food and water. Elsewhere in Ukraine, at least 21 people, including 2 children, were killed in an overnight strike in the northeastern city of Sumy. Another Russian attack killed 13 civilians at an industrial bakery in the town of Makariv, west of Kyiv. 4 civilians were killed by Russian mortar fire Sunday as they tried to cross a partially destroyed bridge over the Irpin River. Despite the killings, hundreds of civilians continued to make the journey Monday.
We are from Irpin. There was heavy shelling in Irpin. They fired at houses, people. A woman and a 13-year-old child died. All houses were shelled. A few people left here. It is hard and scary. It is a war. It is fascism. It is genocide against the whole Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine.
The European Union says leaders will meet at a summit this week to discuss ways to phase out the EU's dependency on Russian fossil fuels as it seeks to punish Russia over its invasion of Ukraine. The EU currently imports about half its coal and gas from Russia and about a third of its oil. In Washington, D.C., White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said Monday President Biden has not yet reached a decision on whether to ban U.S. imports of Russian oil.
I would note that what the president is most focused on is ensuring we are continuing to take steps to deliver punishing economic consequences on Putin, while taking all action necessary to limit the impact to prices at the gas pump.
Over the weekend, the Biden administration sent a delegation to Venezuela to explore easing oil sanctions as it searches for new sources of energy to replace Russian fossil fuels. The United Nations says more than 2 million people have fled Ukraine since the start of the Russian invasion less than 2 weeks ago. It's the largest and fastest displacement of people in Europe since World War II. More than half the refugees have crossed into neighboring Poland. This comes as hundreds of members of Ukraine's minority Roma population, many of whom are undocumented, report they've been turned around at border crossings and have faced discrimination while trying to flee Ukraine. In Puerto Rico, rights activists are reporting a group of 9 Haitian asylum seekers have been stranded on the island of Desecheo for days without food or water and are in need of urgent medical care. A scuba diving and sailing boat spotted the group over the weekend but was unable to navigate closer to the island located off the west coast of Puerto Rico, so staff contacted the Coast Guard to rescue the group. Democracy Now! Spoke to Catherine Edgerton, an abolition advocate who works with the crew that found the refugees.
We saw some people waving a red cloth from the island, and we got closer to see that there were 9 people on the beach waiting for assistance. So we called the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard directed us to not approach, to not offer assistance. When they didn't show up, we packed up some provisions, water, into bags that I could carry, and I swam them in. There were 9 people on the island, one of whom was very ill. All of them were very dehydrated and sunburned and quite desperate for help. They had been there for 3 days. So I swam back to the boat and we called the Coast Guard again. They assured us that they were on the way. And yeah, we were horrified to see 24 hours go by with no Coast Guard.
The Coast Guard has now involved Customs and Border Protection. In a statement, CBP told Democracy Now! Agents were expected to retrieve the Haitian asylum seekers from the island today. Advocates are demanding the asylum seekers be allowed to stay in the United States without the threat of detention or deportation. The United Nations warns conflict in northern Ethiopia has escalated in recent months with widespread reports of civilian deaths, rapes, and other atrocities. UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet said Monday her staff recorded 304 deaths and 373 injuries attributed to the Ethiopian Air Force since November.
During this period, Ethiopia's human rights and security situation deteriorated significantly, in large part due to the extension of the conflict in Tigray to other parts of northern Ethiopia. Our office continued to receive reports of severe and wide-scale human rights violations in the context of expanding conflict in Afar and Amara regions, as well as in Tigray.
The UN also warned of a deteriorating human rights situation in Afghanistan, where nearly 400 civilians have been killed in attacks since the Taliban takeover last August. The Biden administration's released a mentally ill torture survivor who was held at the Guantanamo Bay prison for nearly 20 years, most of that time without charge. Mohammed al-Qahtani was diagnosed with schizophrenia long before his capture in Afghanistan in 2001. His condition deteriorated further after he was rendered to Guantanamo in 2002, where he was subjected to 20-hour-per-day interrogations for weeks in which he suffered physical, sexual, and psychological abuse. Al-Qahtani's lawyer, Shayna Kadidal of the Center for Constitutional Rights, said, quote, Mohammed has always belonged in the care of psychiatrists, not in a prison. He survived being tortured and detained at Guantanamo through enormous personal courage, and we're very hopeful that with proper treatment, with his family nearby, he'll learn to manage his symptoms and salvage the remainder of his life. The number of confirmed deaths from coronavirus passed 6 million worldwide, 2 years after the start of the pandemic. Researchers believe the true toll is far higher, with disease modelers at University of Washington estimating more than 15 million people have died of COVID-19. Here in the United States, hospitalizations have fallen far below January's record highs, but nearly 1,500 people a day continue to die of COVID-19 in the U.S. on average every day. In Florida, the Surgeon General, Dr. Joseph Ladapo, on Monday shrugged off advice from the Centers for Disease Control that children get vaccinated.
The Florida Department of Health is going to be the first state to officially recommend against the COVID-19 vaccines for healthy children.
The Florida Surgeon General is an anti-mask vaccine skeptic and a proponent of the widely discredited theory of achieving herd immunity through natural infection, which Dr. Anthony Fauci has called nonsense and very dangerous. The Florida Surgeon General was appointed by Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, who last week bullied high school students for wearing masks as they stood behind his lectern at a public event.
You do not have to wear those masks. I mean, please take care of it. Honestly, it's not doing anything, and we got to stop with this COVID theater. So if you want to wear it, fine, but this is ridiculous.
Governor DeSantis has refused to apologize. His campaign is using the incident to raise funds. Meanwhile, one of the teenagers who he told to take off his masks, mother, is immunocompromised and has spoken out. Elsewhere in Florida, protests continue against anti-LGBTQ+ legislation known as the Don't Say Gay bill that would prohibit discussions about sexual orientation and gender identity at schools. Thousands of students led a massive walkout at Winter Park High School in Orange County, Florida yesterday, chanting, "We say gay." Hundreds more students, teachers, and allies gathered outside and inside the Florida State Capitol in Tallahassee Monday as the bill is now being considered by the Florida State Senate. The U.S. Supreme Court's rejected a bid by North Carolina and Pennsylvania Republicans to restore electoral maps that were struck down by lower courts as illegally gerrymandered. In a 6-3 ruling, justices ruled electoral maps redrawn by courts should be used instead. In Hawaii, The Defense Department is permanently shutting down the Navy's Red Hill fuel storage facility on the island of Oahu. Native water protectors and environmentalists have long fought to close the underground fuel storage. Pressure mounted after a petroleum leak contaminated the water supply that serves over 90,000 families around the naval base of Pearl Harbor. The site also threatened the water safety of other communities as it's located just 100 feet above the primary groundwater aquifer for Honolulu and the rest of Oahu. The Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility has been used since the 1940s to provide fuel to Pearl Harbor. And thousands of women around the world are taking part in streets to mark International Women's Day today. Actions took place across Turkey, India, Bangladesh, and other regions in recent days. Marches in Pakistan were met with the threat of violence, but women's rights advocates vowed to move forward with rallies in Islamabad and other cities. In Mexico, activists denounced the growing number of femicides in the country. A blimp was seen flying over Mexico City Monday with the words 10 femicides per day, and no victim is forgotten. Meanwhile, Bolivian feminist groups protested in the capital, La Paz, Monday.
Justice for us all. We have come to demand justice. We have sons and daughters who are crying in our homes, and the judges and prosecutors are not interested in justice. Are you not born of a mother? Do you not have sisters? We only ask for justice.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now! Co-host Juan Gonzalez in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.